My name is Diane Sands, and I am the moderator for the panel, the last panel of the day, which is on leadership. I'd like to go back to the title of the panel, again, of this conference, which is Holding Up Half the Sky, Women's Leadership and Development. And I'm delighted to be on this particular panel because I think leadership's the bottom line. There are lots of problems out there, but they don't get solved or addressed unless you have leadership. And leadership means different things to different people. It looks different in different cultures. But in the end, I would argue that leadership is really about mobilizing both energy and skills to make something happen. Very simple definition. Leadership, some people think, is something you're born with or you're entitled to because you have certain privileges, white, male, rich, whatever it might be. I think that is not an empowerment definition of leadership. I do think it is something that, for the most part, people learn, develop, practice, and that is something that needs to be practiced by women as a group. My hope is that as people discuss leadership in this final panel, they will talk about leadership of women, not a woman, but of women working together to move these agendas to create change. So as each of these women talk, I've asked them to talk a little bit about what women's leadership looks like in their own cultural context. You know, what are some of the great things that are happening, and there are many things happening to develop women's leadership to address many of the issues we've talked about today, as well as what are the challenges we're still facing. What are the commonalities that we have between different cultures, but also what are the differences so that we are all, I think, better informed in realizing the complexity of this issue. And I think the last panel is particularly important. I particularly appreciated your comments about how do women participate in decision-making about their own lives. And I think we've heard some discussion, some governments mandate it. You will have 40% women or whatever. My comment is, oh crap with that, I'll take 50% or more. We're 50% or more of the population. Don't be telling me I'm taking any less than that. But you can mandate it by law, and as we hear, that doesn't always work so well, that if women don't feel empowered or self-confident or have the skills, you can pass a law all you want that says 50% of the positions are going to be held by women, and it isn't going to work. So it's something that's organic. It has to grow. It grows in women. It grows in a society and in a culture. And so the women who are going to be speaking today are going to talk about the movements in various contexts to create women's leadership training for the most part. How do we develop that? All of our women today, all of you, are leaders. Each of these women are leaders in their own context, but they are also here in their capacity to talk about what they do in their professional life to develop the leadership of women as a group. Each of them do that in very different contexts, and I know you will all appreciate that, but they will each talk about their own perspective and history on this topic. So I'm not going to give you a biography of each of them. You can read it as well as I. I'm thrilled to say, however, that I have a historic connection to every single one of these women, from Luana and I going back 43 years or something, to having spent the last 2 weeks as the partner with Sutada here in the United States. And Kim and I realized that we both ran women's lobbies, which are coalitions of large numbers of women's groups in different states at the same time back in the 80s. So it's been a delight for me to be invited to lead and moderate this particular panel and to be able to see these three extraordinary women again. So with that, I'm going to start with Kim Gandy. She's going to talk about some of her work on the national scene, particularly in the United States, in terms of developing women's leadership. Please give her a hand.
There's a wonderful stool here, which I think I'm going to move.
I can make you taller.
And if you're in Washington, D.C., they call that a boxer box. Barbara Boxer takes it with her everywhere she goes. We should just call it the Barbara box, though, because Barbara Mikulski also uses it, especially when they're both at the same place. I was thinking we should start with calisthenics, have the urge to, stand up for women, reach for the sky, jump for joy, throw your weight around, do all of those things that will make us feel like we can sit through another hour. And I'm hoping that this will be lively enough and that you'll have lots of questions and lots of discussion that we can make this something that will not cause you to doze during this last session. The women of today are the thoughts of their mothers and grandmothers, embodied and made alive. They are active, capable, determined, and bound to win. They have 1,000 generations back of them. Millions of women, dead and gone, are speaking through us today. Now, that sounds like something I would say. Sounds like something any of us might say about the young women today who are taking charge of their lives. But it was actually said by a suffragist leader in the 1800s, 120 years ago, 30 years before we won the right to vote. If you go back a few years, we talked about the women's leadership from cultural perspectives. And when I was talking to Diane, I talked about being in Louisiana. I did run the Louisiana Women's Lobby Network. We call it Louisiana, if you're down there. The Louisiana Women's Lobby Network. And when I was growing up in Louisiana, in the northern part of the state, the Bible Belt part, where religion was a very integral part of both public and private life, separation of church and state notwithstanding, women were really only allowed, if you will, it was really only okay for women to be leaders if they were volunteers, usually at church or at school, or if they didn't get any credit for anything that they did. If you only did it behind the scenes, because, it was considered sort of unseemly to be recognized for doing good works that should be their own reward. Men, of course, could be recognized. That was okay. They were the deacons and the elders in church. This was at a time when I was Presbyterian, but even the mainstream denominations didn't have women in church leadership. Men could also be paid. They were on the school board, and they were the principals and assistant principals. And the women at that time, certainly at least in the Deep South and the part where I grew up, rarely even went to college. We were dramatically underrepresented in college attendance, except occasionally in search of a well-positioned husband. And it took a while for that to change. I have a beautiful bronze plaque that came from my church, and the plaque says W.A. Gandy Hall. And that's because the fellowship hall at the Presbyterian Church was named for my grandfather. But this plaque doesn't look like it was ever used, and that's because it wasn't. When they showed the plaque to my grandfather and told him that they were going to install it in the fellowship hall, which they were renaming for him, he said, "Don't you dare. If my wife's name is not on that plaque, I don't want it there." So that's why I have the plaque that says W.A. Gandy Hall, because the one that says Gertrude and W.A. Gandy Hall is hanging in the First Presbyterian Church in Gandy Hall. But that, for me, and I was pretty young when that happened, was a real eye-opener, because I don't think even at that young age that it had occurred to me that even though my grandmother, best I could tell, did a whole lot more work at the church than my grandfather did, that he was consistently the one who received the recognition for it and who was in all of the leadership positions in the church, because that's just the way it was. Now, fast forward after 40 years of the women's movement, today there's a pretty widespread opinion among men at least, and quite a few women, that things are pretty much okay for American women. Not that there isn't violence or some issues around reproductive rights and health and some of that, but, on the whole, that the women's movement has been really successful and that women are well represented in every facet of American life. And that's not just from the Independent Women's Forum and conservative groups. I hear that pretty often. It's a repeated theme in the media. One of the facts that's often cited in support of that is the fact that women are now earning the majority of college degrees and the majority of graduate degrees. And clearly women have arrived. They're outnumbering men everywhere. And now we have to worry about our sons, and we need some affirmative action for the boys because they're not succeeding well enough. Now we need a national organization for men, which I always had a stock answer to that when I was president of NOW, because men would say, don't we need a national organization for men? And I would say very seriously, well, we have one. I said, really, we do? I said, yes, it's called the Fortune 500, the United States Congress. And I had 3 or 4 other, they usually laughed, actually. But, it doesn't take much more than a quick look at the hard numbers on women in public leadership to see that compared with the reality, this idea that everything is pretty much equal and women are pretty much everywhere is mostly wishful thinking. As Gloria Steinem once said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And the truth is that it's a lot harder for women to rise to leadership positions than it is for men in a lot of ways, virtually none of them that are actually related to our competency. A few decades ago, several decades ago, I guess I was in my 20s, I had a poster on my wall of a woman in a full suit of armor with a sword, and she had her foot up on a dragon that she apparently had just slain. You probably had that poster. Diane still has that poster. It says, women have to be twice as good as men to be considered equal. Fortunately, that's not difficult, said the. But it is more difficult to think than you think to get women into leadership, because if it weren't, there would be a lot more of us there. I've called it the 16% ceiling. Sometimes I call it the magic number. But a couple of months ago, I heard the president of Barnard College call it, quote, the 16% ghetto. Does anybody know what 16% is, what that magic number means? It's a few hands went up. I'll give you the quote from the Barnard College president. Quote, if you look at any sector, be it aerospace engineering, Hollywood films, higher education, or Fortune 500 leading positions, women max out at roughly 16%. That is a crime, she said, and a waste of incredible talent. But I will add to that women are also 16% of police, 16% of the United States military, just under 16% of equity partners in law firms, despite having been the majority of law school graduates for about 30 years. We just took a big leap to the high 16s in Congress. In the US House, we are 16.8, almost 17. But we're down to 12% of governors, so we gained a little bit in Congress and lost a couple of governors. But it has to make you think when you look at so many different areas. It almost seems like a magic number that you bump up repeatedly against 16%, as though somebody says, oh, okay, enough. No more women. We're getting a little nervous here. And 16% is sort of a magic number. So in the areas where we have beaten the 16%, it almost feels like a really significant change, a really significant amount of progress to beat that 16%. But step back and think about so many walks of life where women max out at 16% in terms of positions of authority, prestige, recognition, and leadership, and you realize that we have some serious problems. There's an excellent book by Deborah Rohde from Stanford with Barbara Kellerman called Women in Leadership, and they spell out some more of these disparities. Over half of college graduates are women, we know that, but less than a quarter of full professors and less than a fifth of college presidents. I always remarked, we had looked at a study a while back that showed that my undergrad degree was in math. Women are over 50% of the math majors, but only 8% of the math professors. Just for example, even though for years we've been the majority of graduates with math degrees. In management, women account for about a third of all MBA classes, but only 2% of Fortune 500 CEOs, 6% of top earners, and 8% of top leadership positions, and again, the magic number, 16% of boards of directors and corporate officers, even though we've been a third of MBA graduates literally for decades. Deborah Rohde also said that in law, women continue to constitute about half of new entrants to the profession, but again, less than 20% of law firm partners, federal judges, law school deans, Fortune 500 general counsels, and this is the one that really shocked me. Half of the students in divinity school are women, half, but they account for only 3% of the pastors of large congregations in Protestant churches that have been ordaining women for decades. So these aren't churches that are new to the ordination of women. These are churches that have been ordaining women for decades, and women are 2% of the pastors, 3% of the pastors, despite being 50% of the divinity school. I mean, there are certainly a few bright spots. We now have 3 women on the U.S. Supreme Court, 2 of them appointed by the current president. That's a breakthrough. And we've had 3 women secretaries of state. I guess we haven't had a male secretary of state for something like 15 years. So our kids now think that you have to be female to be secretary of state. It's like, I have a friend's son who thought that all doctors were female because his pediatrician was female, his dentist was female. You know, he just thought that was, if you wanted to be a doctor, you had to be a girl. That's just how it went. But if you define leadership primarily as the holding of positions of power and influence, regardless of the realm, women aren't doing too well in the U.S., or for that matter, in the rest of the world. It makes Vietnam's 30% goal sound pretty good, doesn't it? Like, oh, 30% doesn't sound too bad. The facts of this reality are quite clear, but the why is less clear. I'd like to focus on one of the areas that has a little more clarity to it, which is women in political leadership. And that is an area where there's been a really concerted effort by a lot of organizations, by women's PACs like Emily's List, groups like Emerge that are around the country, WOOF-PAC, Women Under 40 PAC, Running Start, groups that encourage younger women to run for office, the National Organization for Women, Nationalist Political Caucus. All of these groups have PACs, and they have worked for years to get women into political office. That's part of the reason that we're up to something like 24% in state legislatures, because there's been a really concerted effort to get women to run and to have state and local PACs that also help women. There's also a little more transparency in political leadership because you have campaigning that's done pretty much in public. You generally see what's being put out there, what the candidates are doing, and the decisions are made by a large group of people. They're not made by a board of directors in a closed room or even a single supervisor. So at least in political leadership, you have a little bit of transparency in the process. You can look and see what's going on. And what we also know is that overall, when women do run for office, they get elected in similar percentages to men. Men are not especially more likely to be elected when they run than women are. But so few of us run. Part of that is local party politics. Some of it is national party politics. where women get the nod only if it's a really tough seat. You know, if you're running against an incumbent or where the opposing party candidate is really tough. Okay, now they'll let Sally run. But if it's an open seat, women are far less likely to have their party's support, Republican or Democrat, for an open seat than for a seat that's a tough one. And in fact, when there's an open seat, it's usually, you know, well, it's good old Joe's turn, even when Sally was the one who 2 years ago took one for the team to run against the incumbent. Now that it's an open seat, Sally's not on the list anymore, and there's somebody else who's being moved to the top. However, there is a socialization element to this as well, and we found it over and over as we've talked to women and tried to recruit women to run for office. And women wait to be asked. Men say, and this is very, very broad, and it seems to be true in almost every level of office. Men say, why, I think I'd be a fine congressman. And the women say, who, me? Oh, well, I've only, and then, you know, list 18 major things that she's done. Really, me? You think I would be good at this? And a lot of that really is socialization. You're just not supposed to, as women, you're just taught not to put yourself out there, whereas men are very much encouraged to do that. And what we found an effective way to recruit women is to get a lot of other women to ask her to run, because that's really what moves women to run, is being asked to run by other people, men or women. The second thing that holds women back from running for office is that they think they have to be qualified. I would always say, you know, spend a day in the Louisiana legislature and then come back and tell me that you are not more qualified than 95% of the people who are there already. And the reality is that a lot of women's experiences are missing. You know, we don't have enough nurses who know what goes on in the healthcare system, or enough teachers who know what's happening in the educational system, or enough social workers who really have some insights into dealing with poverty. So that's an area where women's political leadership makes a real difference. And I'm out of time, so I'm not going to talk about Sandra Fluke right now, but I bet many of you recognize her name. Right, we'll talk about her later. But I want to share with you the best advice that I've ever heard for moving up in politics. And it came from Diane Watson, who was most recently a member of Congress from California. But she was in the California State Senate about 15 years ago when she said this. Oh, 15 years ago. Posh, it was 25 years ago. But she said, hitch your wagon to a star and get out and push like hell.
Thank you, Kim. And there's much to follow up on in the meat of that discussion. Next, I'd like to introduce one of our guests from Southeast Asia. Dr. Sutada has been my partner for the last 3 weeks. I'm honored to have gotten to know her. She is a remarkable woman. She is both has a PhD in public administration, teaches at a university, but she also is a co-director of a coalition of more than 80 women's organizations, NGOs, that are working in various capacities in Thailand. And in that regard, I think she has a lot to share with us about women's leadership. Sutada?
Have to stand up. Thank you for invite me to come here, and also give me a chance to speak. And bear with me because my English is not perfect, and I'm made in Thailand, so never been abroad in education, just presenting my idea. I have, as Gandhi said, we have to prepare double or maybe more, many times than other, to just be equal to other people. And that's why I prepare general speaker prepare only maybe about 8 or 10 slides. I prepare X0 slide. And it isn't difficult. And one thing that I would like to share. Sorry, I have to put my slide. Today is 2 parts. I have to quick the slide, 4 slides per minute. For 20 minutes I have, or maybe 15. 15, so maybe about 6 slides per minute. Well, this is just, if you cannot listen, just read. Huh? I write in English, not Chinese. Right, gender roles versus, gender rights or women roles versus women issue is being confusing in discussion in Thailand, and once we understand this clearly, we know what problem we are talking about. So when I was invited to speak, I talked to Dina, what should I speak? Dina said, you just got first female prime minister, speak about your prime minister as a leader. This is a leadership program. I said, well, she's not a female leader for us. She has no leadership, so I have nothing to talk about her. But I don't, and also for being a woman, it doesn't mean anything for us, you know, as a women movement. So this is kind of nothing justified in this topic at all. Anyway, one thing that I would like to talk about is about the first, talk about the what is the status of women leadership in Thailand currently? If we're talking about the population, we are about 51%, and in each part of the country, we are more than male, about 1-2%. So in generally, I think same population format is women is more than every places in Thailand. But when you're talking about women in Thailand, you have to understand the differences of class, gender roles, I mean race and religious, and also many things happening. So we cannot just talking to women as a women. They are different. So problem that we want to talking with her or roles, it will be different according to these differences. Also, this is my company that I work for 14 years, 15 years. They are a corporation, but if you look at them, they are about, let's say 28 management in there. There are 6 women in this group. 3 are already family, wife, daughter, and sister. Only 3 of us that employee who are in the top level. So this is a pattern of women in business. You can see me. Can you find me in that group? Very little. Next one. My topic today, generally I need 3 hours, but now I have only 15 minutes. Well, it's about women political leadership, which is, it have to be formal and informal section. If you talk formal only, it's nothing in Thailand. Having the female prime minister today is nothing. Having 3, 4, 5, or even 6 ministry, female ministry, also nothing if she doesn't carry whatever we call women agenda with her. Right? So physically being a woman is nothing for us if she not understand what we are fighting for. This is what I would like to talk about. And this just a statistic that we are very poor in terms of number. If you're talking about number of senator, number of representative, number of whatever, we are very small number. We mean women. We have constitution in 1932, And that constitution, luckily, they didn't say man or women. Everyone can go to vote. So women can go to vote as well. But no women go to vote until after 17 years. We have one woman being the representative. And in terms of voters, we have a number of women who are the voters more than men. But in terms of what we call the candidates, you can see women is very little in every constituency because political party, they don't pick up women to be their candidates. In terms of the people who are selected, you can see that since 1990 up to 2011, number of women who can win the election is very low, start from 2.8 until now it's only 15% only, not even 16%, right? But even we have 30% like Vietnam. I don't think that if they don't carry women agenda, I don't care about 30, 40, 50 or more than 50. It's nothing to us. And many laws about women gender equality is dropped because or cannot pass because of some women do not vote as well. This is a reality in Thailand. And this is statistic. You can see the number of women in the formal sector is very low compared with male. I will go very quick. So now move to the informal roles. In Thailand, and I think most of Asian country or Southeast Asian country, we come from the history that women used to be leader of the community in the past, and lots of incident Dr. Do can share with me. It showed that women is a leader in the past long time ago. You can look at the Chinese history, Thai history that I'm showing you from now on, and many. And also one thing that we used to talk teasingly in our country is women is a backseat driver. You know, lots of important decision making of the cabinet or even the prime minister himself. He talked with his wife and then he come up with the idea in the morning and he make the law in the next day, or even make a coup. Believe me. This is our history in snapshot. We have three histories, Sukhothai era, Ayutthaya era, and Ratanakosin era. Every era we have women behind this to push our history in terms of leadership. And this is Sukhothai. We have a figure of women in the stone, which showing that women is a leader, right? In terms of Ayutthaya also, we have a woman. She's a princess, or not princess, a queen. And we have fighting with Burma. She's dressing up like a man because she's the king doesn't want her to be a warrior, but she wants to be. And then she come in between, and she died in the battle. This one also in Ratanakosin, she also fight for the rebels come from Laos. And next one is a woman as well. We have a word called backdoor wife. I don't know in English what is the name, but women who are wives of the prime minister or the top person, we call the great woman behind the great man. She's always make decision and make the thing done, you know. And she's the one who have very good intention to make our country go through the Second World War without being part of the German side and being part of the what you call alliance side, and save our country to be not to be pay back the fine, right? And Also, many women in Thailand in the past, all of them already passed away. They do something good for our country, but they are not being recognized as a first female prime minister, first whatever. But they do very good things, these kind of women. And lots more in Thailand at the moment as well. Sorry about that. Right. From now on, I go to the current one. We also having the we call people participation. It starts from 1997. This is come from the new constitution that people draft out the new by ourselves. Same as 1972 that Montana draft out the constitution. We have election of 99. What you call the delegates. And that constitution, we put one section called people participation. And since then, people start coming out and have share their public sphere. And also women also coming out and doing their public work in their village. The statistic that show that women coming out is we in that drafting delegates, we have 6,744 candidates is women, even though the man is about 12,000 something. And 64 of them is elected from province-wise, so it's showing the women participation in political area. Next one. Let me talk about a little bit about gender roles. Gender roles, I think, is talking about both women and men, but mostly in women roles as well. In the last flooding in Thailand, I mean in the Bangkok, the flood come to Bangkok in 2011, and that flooding, you can see lots of women coming out and fight for their resident, their village. And I don't know where is the men they are, but a lot of women. This is come from the newspaper. So I would say that they are talking about my network. After last time we have a coup in 2006, and the last PM, Mr. We should call him Thaksin, Dr. Thaksin Shinawatra. He self-exiled from the country, but that coup continued 5 years, and that 5 years we have lots of conflict. We call it color-coded. You can remember if you follow my country, yellow camp and red camp is like color spot in the school. They are just wearing t-shirt and they're fighting each other. So after May in 2011, we, the women organization, about 40, 50 organizations just called for the meeting and talking about this topic. And we think we should form sort of a network and be part of the national reforms, because we feel that it's time to come out and it's time to take control of the country. We cannot let the guys doing alone because they are lousy. They cannot, they cannot run our country and they make our country break up. So we start calling ourselves as a REST, W-R-E-S-T is a short name. The full name is Women Networks Reshaping Thailand. And this is our logo. You can see that we are inclusive men and women in our logo. It's not only, this is not only female or women alone. This is a group of, I would call founder. You can see me behind, this kind of, behind at the back row. The first row that sit down, they are very prominent women in Thailand. They are sort of high-profile women. Most of them rich, most of them are high profile, but they come together and join together. Some of them work as an NGO, as a grassroots, but some of them is very high profile. But we happen to let them together and joining hand as a organization, as a networking. This is a very good picture that we have in the women movement in Thailand. 2 minutes left. So let me pass this and share you. This is a topic that we would like to reform. We would like to reform in 6 topics. And it's very serious topics in Thailand. And also we are joining, the way we do, we join every committee that we can. We do not just think of Parliament House. We go everywhere that we can and try to be part of the committee. And be in the part, every section that they are talking about reforms or national reform. So we are involved in media as well. We go everywhere that media want us to speak. We speak. I also speak. My friends speak. Everyone try to show our face and to talk in the same things that we want. It means gender equality, social justice, and give women a chance to speak out. So, and also we try to draft the law. We call the law Gender Equality and Anti-Discrimination Against Women. And we go for what you call, we have the petition, and if people sign 10,000 signatures, we can give the law to the parliament and let them process the law. So this is our movement in last 2 years. And also the flooding, we joined the flooding by helping women in the flood area to help themselves. The latest one that we joined is to fight for the Women Fund that government, under the new Prime Minister, female Prime Minister, she want to give away, 250 or 30 million dollars to every province as a women fund, but without the procedure, without objective, without direction, just give away. And we feel that this is our money, tax people money, and she should not do like that. So we try to against this kind of thing, and we make lots of homework to tell her that the wise way to spend money, what she should do or what government should do. And we speak a lot. This is the agenda or our suggestion to the Women Fund. Also, we join the ASEAN community in terms of human rights. We want to tell the ASEAN community, they are signing the contract in 2015. They want to be one community like EU, and we don't want to follow EU and having a big country. Some people is dropping down. We don't want to follow the bad lesson. So we tell them that if you want to form the ASEAN community, please ask women in these 10 countries what they want from being formed as a one community. And the second part that I have, and I would like to show, is something like our Prime Minister. Can I have 1 more minute? Talking about, 1 more minute for another 40 slides. Right. So sorry, about our Prime Minister. I show you something that what people think about her. There are a few slides that I would like to tell you about her and her brother. You know that they are nominee. And one thing that I would like to show is not about this kind of thing, but about cartoon, which is cartoon is come from media perspective about her administration after she's become the prime minister. This is the first cartoon. You can see that media feeling that she know nothing about violence in the southern of Thailand. She know nothing about, she don't know how to spend money from tax. You know, she's just being a Santa Claus. Or she's being the nominee by her brother who is in Dubai. You know? And also, she's just, when flooding comes, she just do nothing, giving away the, what you call is bag for recover bag, or what, right, to people. And also, she loan from other country. She lend money from other country and give to our people as a loan. So we don't have money in our country. You ask money from other country and you give to poor people. This kind of thing that happen in our country. So my conclusion, I will stop here at the conclusion. The conclusion is being a female prime minister in our country is nothing. But everything that we have to do in Thailand or in other countries is what is the women agenda that you want to move for and you want to fight for, and you have to identify it. Leadership it come from that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sutada. Many of the issues you raised are certainly ones that we all know about. We all know that just because you're female doesn't make you competent. And we could talk about certain political leaders in Montana's past as well. And there's much more to discuss about that topic. Our final speaker is Dr. Luana Ross, and I am pleased to have her come and speak. We are on traditional Salish land. I'm sure she will mention that. And she is the president of Salish Kootenai College, and she's going to talk about leadership from her perspective. Luana?
Apesia. Hello, everyone, and you are on traditional Salish ground, so welcome. Everyone is indeed a visitor, except for maybe my sister cousin, Dr. Gita Swaney, and any other Salish who happen to be in the room. So as an introduction to me, my mother is a Swaney, my grandmother is a McDonald, and so you can now place me solidly on the Flathead Indian Reservation with thousands of relatives. I'm going to tie in a macro level way to the former two speakers and talk about my leadership as a tribal college president. But just a thought on leadership, because culture is such a huge part of being a president at a tribal college that you do not see at other colleges and universities in the US and Canada. Native people are encouraged to remember 7 generations in the past. We are tied to our past, we are tied to our ancestors, and to consider 7 generations in the future when making decisions that concern the people. And that indeed is the case for a college president. So this really could be titled From Boarding Schools to Tribal Colleges, but I'm not going to give you the history on the boarding schools. If you don't know that history, you should know it. There's been a lot of press lately about the lawsuits that are going on. I have a sister who is involved in one of those lawsuits. It's a very emotional issue, but we've come a long way from boarding schools to tribal college universities as they're known today. Tribal college universities began in 1968. If you don't have a little bit of history, you're not going to really get who I am and what I'm doing today in my leadership role. They started in 1968 with the Navajo Community College, and that was a direct answer to the abysmal education that Native people faced. There was a very high, some call it dropout, some will call it push-out rate. I was encouraged. I graduated in 1967, I'm 63, And for those of you who are young, there is a wisdom that does come with getting older, and so that's not just a myth. It is indeed the truth. But when I started college in 1967, the quote guidance counselor shuffled me towards beauty school because we weren't seen as being very competent. And the other place you were shuffled was towards the pink-collar ghetto. And certainly many minority women and other women ended up in those professions. Nothing against them as professions, it's just that that wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I chose a very small college as a way to start my career. After 1968, there were other tribal colleges that soon followed. The majority of the colleges, if I had a map today and then, are located in the Dakotas, the Great Lake areas, Montana, and the Southwest. In fact, we are very fortunate in the state of Montana has 7 Indian reservations. All 7 Indian reservations have tribal colleges, and that is unusual. So hooray for us in the state of Montana. Of those 7 tribal colleges, 5 of them have women presidents. And so we've been teasing the other 2. They say they can handle us and they'll be okay. But of the 37 tribal colleges, half of them are led by women. And that has been the case for quite a while. And so in terms of education, we are far ahead our counterparts. And so we are doing well in that arena. There were many Native women who were involved in the founding, if not presidents. They were behind the scenes and then sometimes very visible in the foundings of tribal colleges in the 60s and 70s. I have to mention Twyla Martin, Carol Juneau, and Janine Pease, who were very instrumental and women well known in this area. The idea of Salish Kootenai College, which is where I'm from, began brewing around the reservation in 1973. And Flathead Valley Community College, which is located just off the reservation in Kalispell, approached the council and the tribal community, and what they wanted to do was to sign some kind of agreement to where we would send students to them. And that was how it started. However, the students they sent, and I was hoping to be a forester in those days. I was on the first tribal women's forest fighting crew in 1972. They then began taking all of the men, but none of the women, from tribal forestry and shuffling them off to get degrees. When I could see I was not going to be in that group, I then left and ended up with a PhD in sociology. Otherwise, I would be a forester today. So in 1977 was when Salish Kootenai College was formed. Thank goodness to Joe McDonald and Jerry Slater, who had this great dream. I actually taught there. I taught sociology there in 1981. It was a very interesting experience. The first students that we saw, and this is very unique, at least one half, and this is across the nation, just not unique to Salish Kootenai College, were female. And they were older. They were 30 years or older, and of course, tribal members. So now what we see is a younger student population, but still primarily female and primarily tribal. Salish Kootenai College is also very different than other tribal colleges because we have 80 different tribes represented. And so because we are known as the flagship research tribal college, there are many people in Canada, tribal members, and around the U.S. who want to come to Salish Kootenai College. The other thing that we're seeing that's very different, though, and this is something that is a crisis at our school, and it should be a crisis for everyone, is we have always served a very marginalized population. These are students that are not college ready. That's not new. But what is new is at least 20% of our student population are homeless. That is new, and that's a crisis. And when I asked student services, well, how many are hungry, because we're starting our own food pantry, they said all our students are hungry. So that's the population, and I have to tailor my leadership to that population. Just a word about the founders of tribal colleges, and that would include Kate Shanley's brother, Jim Shanley, who's known as a very special person in the American Indian Ed movement. They're a very special group. They're highly revered to this day. They had two characteristics in common. They were doers and they were dreamers. And these are two great qualities of leadership that would serve anybody well, not just those of us in Indian Ed. The other thing that's very different about tribal colleges is they would not exist without the founders, but without their respective tribal communities who really recognize there's a crisis regarding education, because education is empowerment. We all know that. There's a crisis in Indian country. And then the tribal councils, who are absolutely supportive. If they wouldn't have had that, then you wouldn't have a tribal college. So the tribal colleges were instrumental in helping us politically, helping us secure money, going to the Hill in DC and helping us out there. The community leaders certainly were recognized, and to this day are recognized and support us. The other boards that are supportive are the Board of Trustees, and I'm now working with a fabulous Board of Trustees. I also have a very great foundation board, and without them, we would be struggling because of financial woes. State schools are struggling because of financial woes. Tribal colleges are struggling because of financial woes. The other thing that's instrumental with our Board of Trustees is they really guide us philosophically, and that includes our culture. They set us on a course, and we absolutely have to follow that course, and that's a good thing because it's all about our culture and who we are as a people. The thing that I really enjoy about tribal colleges too is I've been in mainstream schools forever. I've been gone for 30 years. I feel very honored that I was welcomed back into my community and asked by our Board of Trustees to serve as the next president. But I am now finally at an institution in which being Indian is celebrated, and that is very different, and that feels really good. And so, like I said, this is a very important part of who we are. The tribal values and our traditions ideally are woven into our curriculum. That can be problematic when you have a large non-native faculty, and we do, and so we're trying to figure out how to deal with that problem, because it is a problem and it is an issue. We have another group that bears mentioning, and that's the American Indian Higher Ed Consortium. They lobby for us. They're the glue that holds us together as a group. They set up meetings with key politicians and key donors for us. And so we've been very successful as a group because we have this other group holding us together. They were very instrumental in getting the Tribally Controlled Community College Act passed, and that's the source and the very meat of our funding. But to me, what I see with tribal colleges is they are a way to re-empower us as Native communities. That's all about self-determination, and that's all about issues of sovereignty. One way to empower is economics, and I know there's data. I've just been traveling so much in April. I haven't had time to pull any data, but I know it's there. But data does reveal that reservations that have tribal colleges fare much better income-wise than those that don't. And it's broken down by gender, and I know it shows that women fare much better on the reservations that have tribal colleges. That alone should be the reason for you to continually support your local tribal colleges. The other thing that's important that I really relish is relationality. Tribal colleges are like big families, and yes, of course, sometimes they're dysfunctional, but that's okay because they're our dysfunctional family. But we're all about relationality. We're not just an academic community, and we refer to each other as the SKC family, and I really like that. But we not only have a relationship with each other because it's relationality, we have a relationship with the land and the environment. And so we're all about being sustainable. We're all about acknowledging that the earth is indeed our mother. We're all about being good stewards, and that is really woven in to whatever happens, all of the events, the curriculum, and so on. Let me say a word about my ideas, my very own ideas on Indian Ed. And one, you should know that learning has always been a part of our traditions. There's a misconception that we weren't learning, until the colonizers came and sent us all to school. That couldn't be the furthest from the truth, right? And I'm sure you all get that. You're a very astute audience. And so learning has always been a part of our traditions. And so what we're doing at tribal colleges that is a lot of fun for me is recapturing Indigenous educational sovereignty. And there's a statement, and just let me read this to you because it really shows you what I mean by that in a more real way. And this is a statement on Indigenous peoples' rights in education, and it really speaks to my leadership style and what I'm doing. It says, "We have the right to be Indigenous. That is an essential prerequisite to developing and maintaining culturally appropriate and sustainable education for Indigenous peoples. We are an educational institution that asserts the very basic form of self-determination that we do indeed have the right to be Indigenous." So we're not about assimilationist kind of education. And when I say that we have some places that are problematic, it's the more assimilationist departments that are problematic. So I want to borrow from Ray Barnhart, who's a shaker and leader, not only in AHEC, but WINHEC, World Indigenous Nations Higher Ed Consortium. And borrowing from him, I believe, as the leader of Salish Kootenai College, that we must focus on, one, the articulation of Indigenous epistemologies, and that's the ways of knowing education, philosophy, and research, and we have a stellar faculty. We are the research institution that are involved in Indigenous epistemologies and looking at Indigenous research methodologies, and so I would think that other institutions would be looking to us because we are very cutting edge that way. Specifically, of course, even though we represent 80 different tribal nations, we are all about Salish Kootenai and Pend Oreille knowledge systems. We are also focusing on the protection and enhancement of our spiritual beliefs, our cultures, and our languages are key. And that's an area that's been problematic and an area that is getting a lot of my focus. We are also about advancing the social, economic, and political status of Indian people that contribute to the well-being of our communities. So we want to know, kind of from a Department of Labor focus, what does our community need and how can we train those people to best serve our community? We are place-based and we are community-based, and that's how we serve our community. Also recognize the significance of Indian education, creating a network for sharing knowledge, recognizing the rights of Indigenous people, protecting, preserving, advocating Indigenous cultural and intellectual property rights, and so on. I firmly believe that education is transformative and restorative, and I know it has been for me, and I know it can be for other people. And so those are the key concepts, transformative and restorative, that I focus on in my leadership. And in the words of the late, great Wilma Mankiller, she said, "The war for Indian children will be won in a classroom." And I believe that to be true. So of course I really push Indian Ed. But just to give you a bit about who I am philosophically and otherwise, and then I'll wind up here. I'm a daughter, a sister, an auntie, a wife, a mother, a Kenna, a grandmother, niece, cousin. I have thousands of relatives. I'm one of 6 girls. In fact, there was a study done in the last year that showed you are more likely to be happy if you were raised with sisters, and indeed that may be true. And one of my sisters, a strong family resemblance, right? Somebody who was with our tribal council with one of our sisters thought that I was her, Julie. Anyway, I thought that was pretty funny because we're everywhere and we're doing many things. I also have 2 sons. I did a very good job raising those boys. I'm very proud of them. I am unapologetically a feminist. I've been involved in indigenous feminist movements. I've developed a whole curriculum, probably one of the first in the nation to develop a curriculum around indigenous feminisms. The best thing that ever happened to Indian education in the U.S. and Canada is tribal colleges. And I've had a long career, like I said, in mainstream institutions, but I've always focused on Indian issues and Indian education. But my core values, who I am as a person, reflect my leadership philosophy. And at the center is a deep affection for and a commitment to the tribes. And I think that's absolutely vital. I have 2 minutes. Okay, let me just say this because it'll take me back to family and then it'll wrap it up. In my opinion, one of the most important hallmarks of a good administrator is one who is fair and just. And I learned that from my mother, and because I've been vitally interested in issues of social justice, I strive to do what is right and what is fair. And I think that's really important, particularly in a tribal college setting. And so just in conclusion, it was once thought that Indians didn't belong in academia. You know, we weren't smart enough. In fact, in Ronan High School, where I graduated from, I was seen as the lost cause, you know, the girl who should go to beauty school, or else this was the other thing, and the younger generation isn't going to get it, but those my age and older will. When I decided I was going to college, the guidance counselor asked if I was going to get my MRS degree, and I didn't know what that meant. You know, it means you're going to find a husband and be a Mrs. Anyway, the point is, I was seen as a lost cause. I was seen as somebody who didn't belong in academia. But Indians belong everywhere, and Indian women belong everywhere. There was a huge campaign during the boarding school time period to Christianize and civilize us. That, of course, was a failure. And then regarding lost causes, because I've thought a lot about that, my dear mother has this sentence taped up on her cupboard, and it says, "A lost cause can find itself in a noble dream." And I know, isn't that profound? I think that's so profound. So decades ago, Joe McDonald and Jerry Slater had a dream. So thanks to them, here I am at the helm of Salish Kootenai College, the flagship tribal college. I consider it a privilege and an honor to be the president of Salish Kootenai College. So Lemlech Pesia.
Well, I hope you are as amazed as I am in hearing these 3 women who are all 3 both dreamers and doers. And I think that's what women's leadership is about, is how do you turn dreams into realities. So we have 15 minutes for some questions. Comments? Yes, sir.
You stand up.
All right. So it seems to me that as I hear these stories about women in leadership, I mean, there's been a struggle. You've had to create space for that to happen. So I'd be very interested to hear if all the panelists, including the moderator, could say, pick the one thing that gave you space to become leadership. I'm just curious as to what those are.
Microphones are there.
I don't think I've ever thought about that particular question, but I think that, I guess I go back to when I was a law student, and we were working in Louisiana now to change some of the laws, particularly domestic violence laws. We didn't have provisions for the victim to stay in the family home or to have temporary custody. There were a lot of things like that. And a couple of us who were law students said, well, you know, we'll just write a new law and get it passed, and that's all. And the elders, if you will, from the chapter who I look back on it and they were, probably 35. They seemed so old at the time, when you're 23. But none of them said, you don't know anything about writing laws. None of them said, what a silly idea. Why would you try to do that? They said, yeah, sure, go ahead. We'll help you find somebody to introduce it. And we spent months doing the research, writing the legislation. We did find somebody to introduce it, and it took 3 years, but it passed, and it was later used by the National Conference of State Legislators as model legislation, written by a law student and a couple of friends who really had no idea what they were doing. And it's because the people who could have said, you don't know what you're doing, said, yeah, go ahead, do this. You can take this on. You can be a leader.
I think that question's an important one around creating space, and I think one of our responsibilities as the elders now of this movement is to create space for other women to step into those leadership roles, and that's very much what each of these kinds of organizations do for other people. Sutada?
Yeah, I think the first public space that Thai women have a great effort to do is 1997 Constitution. If you read this constitution, which is in English as well, compare with other before. We have been formed together as a group of women who are driving through the what we call ourselves is political women in political leadership groups, and we study about the constitution, the past, the future, whatever we want it to be, and we put every single section that we think that should have our view in that section. Well, some of section is already taken away, and we fight every time that we have invited to the committee. And that constitution 1997, which is part of it already in 2007 as well, and use it at the moment, is sort of the open door for us to come into the public space in Thailand at the moment. And it took 10, 15 years that we are stronger as a networking right now, and we are moving forward from this 1997 startup, opening our space. Don't ask for the space. You have to come out from your home, your kitchen, and open space by yourselves and try to put your idea into constitution, the first one, and then go to everywhere. After that, use it as a Bible.
Use it as a tool.
And for me, I would say it was a support of family members for all females to excel. We've always had that support, and so how lucky I am to come from a family like that. And then I started teaching at Salish Kootenai College and the University of Montana in 1981. There were very few Indians at that level in academia and very few women. And so I had to take the space. And so I had to excel and do extra good work. So then I ended up on faculty at Berkeley, and that was when you're given space. When you're at Berkeley, it was like I could do no wrong. Whatever I wrote was funded. Whatever I wrote, I was granted. And so that really helped me, and that was serendipity. I just plain lucked out on that one. But many times you just have to take the space, and you really have to persevere. But now that I am older, as Diane and I are recognizing, I mentor as many women. Well, I mentor men as well. But my whole senior administration has just turned out to be female, and I'm very much involved in a mentoring relationship with them.
I do a lot of mentoring in the legislature of younger women, and in many ways. I think there are formal ways we do this through various training programs, through there are all kinds of leadership training programs, but also, as a historian, I have to say that I think history creates an important public space because it gives people in their head a view that women have occupied public space and that women have a right to that. Because I think in the end it's, do you have a right to take that power in that space? And that can be difficult if you've been told all your life that women can't do this, or that you've never seen women do it. I mean, the first woman I saw take public space was a woman who was the first Native American legislator in the state of Montana back when I was a little kid up on the Fort Peck Reservation. Important to have those images in your head and know that women have done this thing before, and that you are connected to a long line of men and women who fought for social justice and have taken up public space. So history is a political tool. Another question?
I'm just going to be thinking out loud, but it seems to me that one of the challenges for women participating in leadership has to do with family obligations, and it can also apply to the working poor or lower class people who do not have the resources to have somebody else take care of their kids, or to apply all their energies in a leadership position. So I'm wondering if the panel has any suggestions for how they did it if they had family obligations that were very important to them, and how you address kind of the commonality of women still being the primary caregivers for families.
Well, I'll start because I had a child very young. I was not married. I ended up on welfare. I then went back to school. Because I had an extended family and 5 sisters, they would come every final week, because my undergraduate is from the University of Montana, and watch my son. And so it was because of the extended family network that I could do that. But we were so desperately poor. In fact, I'm still really psychologically poor. I'll never get over that. And so I know what you're thinking, and I know how hard it is. But my first husband was murdered, and so that was another thing that happened. And then I went away to graduate school, and I had a child, and I had no network, and I had to carve out a network. It was never easy. I ended up marrying a fabulous man who is a primary caretaker in our family, cooks every meal, again, just plain lucked out. But moving back to the reservation, I have many, many people financially dependent on me. So now I'm back into the role of being a primary caretaker in many, many different ways. Is it easy? No. Can it be done? Yes. But I could have never done what I'm doing today back then. You know, it was a long process for me, but very, very difficult. But you can create families and friends wherever you go, and I just managed to do that.
Well, I think this is what I would say is general problem that women facing in Thailand as well, and it won't be the obstacles for us if we want to do things. Well, I've been in the meeting that they bring their children together in a meeting room, and that's we have to go through it. Or sometimes we have to have weekend meeting. We have to go to somebody's house and have a meeting over there. We adapt every strategy, just keep on our duty and also doing our additional work. And we call it as a double work but single pay. We get paid at the day work, but the double work is mean housework that we don't have a pay. And I think this is a price to pay, that if you want to make something happen in the public sphere, or if you want to do something for the society, you have to dedicate. But in the long term, I mean, the public policy, or even in constitution, or even in the whatever that you want to fight for, it will compensate in those elements of law. We have very, in a guy's or men perception, they might think this is too much, you ask for too many, but we said, as a mother of the nation, you should give, because this is your children as well. If you don't pay women well, who will raise up your children? You know, this kind of thing we have to rationalize our dedication at the end of the day. Yeah.
Well, I too was fortunate in a different way. My husband is a college professor, and he writes books. So he does a lot of his work at home. So that made things easier for us, particularly since I was, for many years, working very long hours and traveling on weekends and speaking and that sort of thing. So it was different. But one thing that I think we have to do as a society is expand our expectations of men. You know, we can't just keep on thinking that you're both going to work full-time and then she's going to do the second shift at home while you put your feet up. And there are some men who still do that, and a lot of men who don't. I look at my daughters who are 16 and 19. There's no way they're going to put up with that. I mean, that's not going to be part of the deal for them. And so, and I do think that's changing, because I think whether the young men like the idea or not, the young women are going to insist that there be more equality. We may not get to 50-50, but I think it's going to be much better than it was with my generation. The other thing I'd say is that a lot of us need to reevaluate our standards. I had to have a different standard about exactly how clean the kitchen would be and how often the refrigerator was going to be cleaned out and that sort of thing, because the alternative was to do it myself. And I decided that there were just some things I could live with that maybe I thought I couldn't, but it turns out I could.
And in the end, I would say revolutions are created in the hearts and souls of men and women. That's when you really see the changes, when it's in the consciousness and the hearts of people. In the commitment we have to have you out of here on time, I would like to thank this panel and ask you to join me in thanking them for their contribution. Ask Carrie to come up for a final word. Thank you all so much for your attention.
One bit of good news, since we've talked about it throughout the day. The Violence Against Women Act passed out of the Senate on a vote of 68 for it, 31 no, 1 didn't vote, and all 15 women in the Senate voted for it.
That means some Republicans voted for it. Please remember the House is next, and that's going to be much more difficult, so make sure every one of you has talked to your representative.
I want to add to that they defeated all of the bad amendments before they passed it, all of them.
We've all been sitting for a long time, so this will be very brief. I just want to once again underscore our gratitude for a stellar cast of presenters. This is a very complicated issue. We've just skimmed the surface, but we've done everything I hope we would do here today, and that we got a broad idea of, number one, the worst case scenario, the vital, the complexities, the seriousness of this issue that we still need to keep fighting, some of the global context, the fact that there is now hope and that there's increasingly a legal basis and social development patterns that allow women to attain something approaching equality. But also, we've got people who have put their butts on the line and created role models. And, you know, one of the things that cheers me as a father of a 12-year-old is, you know, we all want respectful kids, but to have her come home and say, you know, I played basketball with the boys today, Dad, and I kicked their butts, you know. And to be feisty and to have a mom that she sees as a normal person, what she wants to become, who's strong and independent and intelligent and successful. And I think a lot of the people that we've had speak today, in fact, all of them, so far as I know, either represent that or support that in their family and in their larger participatory groups. And I think that's what it's all about, expectations, right? So if we raise young girls to have the expectation that, God bless it, you will do this because I deserve you to do it, then I think we'll all be better off. So one thing I will just call to people's attention, this is not the Mike Mansfield Center who's hosting this. It is Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center. And I admire Mansfield for many things, having the courage to compromise, having the courage to have jerks like Strom Thurmond come out and claim credit for a civil rights bill that he opposed, but also for being very upfront that he would not have been anything without the woman who pushed him and believed in him. And so my fondest hope is that well, I'm too old, but someone will be up here in 20 years and say, you know, behind every strong woman, there's a strong man, too. So thank you all very much, and especially thank you to our panelists.